I think the collaboration between Regents and the Tutu Foundation is because we both share the same sets of values about equality, about peace, about the importance of getting understanding between people from different backgrounds and then being able to mediate carefully between them in order to resolve the many and developing conflicts that we see in the world today.
When one is dealing with conflict, the importance of having quiet conversations between the different groups is absolutely essential. It's where we learn, it's where we understand where different people are coming from. I also think that having a mediator, having a third party, an independent person during those conversations is absolutely essential and invaluable to create that sense of balance and to keep the conversations going.
Both sides need to feel, firstly, that they're in a safe space where they can express what they want to say. A lot of mediators perhaps try to control the process. I think it's very important to give the parties the chance to say what's on their mind. And as a mediator, you don't actually know what really is behind the problem. It's your job to find that out. And you do that by allowing people to tell their story. And they might go off in all kinds of areas, all kinds of directions you didn't expect.
I think as a police officer I have a vital role in establishing a relationship with young people. Quite often the youth that we deal with, they see me as their enemy and often they don't want to talk to me. So I have a vital role in actually communicating with the young person before we can even begin to work on restorative justice.
The wise build bridges and the foolish build walls. And the lesson of the proverb is really not about floods, it's about crises and times of conflict. And it's talking about that the wise are those who reach out and try and find allies and reach across barriers to build a common ground, a common sense of humanity. And when it talks about fools building walls, the reason that it talks about fools is that it's easier to build walls than to build bridges. And so the fool takes the easy way out and the immediate answer, which is, when we're in trouble, look for somebody else to blame. Whereas the wise recognize that when we're in trouble, it probably means we're all in trouble.
I do think we have to be careful about generalisations and platitudes that say it's good to talk. Sometimes there are sound, sensible, logical reasons when not to talk. You can give legitimacy to people who are causing death and destruction by talking to them. They can use it as leverage to get to the negotiating table. So we have to be careful that it isn't just simply that generalisation, it's good to talk.
A lot of journalism is about war. We call it bang bang. War journalism is a rather specialised craft. I did it for 35 years and I always wanted to be a peace journalist, but mediation is very hard. Peace is difficult to make happen. And I saw this in the Balkans, obviously, because war continues from one generation to another and the hatred is in the hearts of people. So anything that can be done to reconcile people and to resolve the conflicts, I'm in favour of. But I also believe there are some conflicts which resist resolution.
Iraq is a complicated case because you've got sectarian and tribal divisions. You've got Sunni, Shias, Kurds. There was a lot of disenfranchisement from the Sunni side, who after the fall of Saddam Hussein felt that the Shia elements were not including them in their fair share of power in Iraq. In terms of getting all sides on board, I think everybody often tends to have their own agenda, and the best way to do that is if you have perhaps a negotiator or a mediator who comes from no sides within that country and who comes from perhaps outside the country and is able to mediate between all three sides from an essentially an objective perspective.
I think in any conflict situation you have to believe that they can be resolved, as a comment my colleague made today at this conference. And you have to believe in the unbelievable. You have to imagine what success looks like and then go full bore for it. No conflict is unresolvable. If one looks at the Northern Ireland peace process as an example, we have situations now where the citizens are safer because people talked. That is the most important point.
Well, one of the things that's happened in recent years since 9/11 is that the journalists have retreated from the battlefield. They're nowhere near it. They're in fortified compounds and green zones, and the agenda has changed. So there are conflicts going on now in Africa and Somalia, in the DRC and South Sudan, which affect global peace. and we know absolutely nothing about them.
If we can understand why people behave the way they do, what drives them to behave, particularly in conflict situations, because in conflict situations we find that people behave in a different way to the way they behave in everyday situations. They behave in conflict in very peculiar ways. So understanding what brings them to that state of mind, what makes them react in the way they do, is really helpful if you're going to try and resolve conflict.
And actually when you get to meet the person on the other end of the sights, the other end of the gun, and you find that they're a human being, that they have some of the same interests as you have, and you can strike up a dialogue. Not that I will ever agree with their standing, but I can accept that they have an understanding of what happened, particularly in Northern Ireland for the last 30 years. I don't have to agree with it or accept it's right, but accept it's their understanding. Of course they have to accept that I have an understanding of the last 30 years.
Self-esteem really is one of the most powerful driving forces, because we all want to feel good about ourselves, we want other people to feel good about us, and that means that we will take up positions which are not really helpful, they are adversarial, and we will fight to maintain our self-esteem, we will fight to build up our self-esteem. If we are humiliated, if we are defeated in an argument, if we are ashamed, if we are put to shame, our self-esteem goes down, and we don't allow that to happen.
Starting off from a place of recognizing our shared humanity with those we know as other. Because if you look at the way that we tend to be socialized in our world, it is that those who are other than us are so very different, right? That there's something inherently different about them to us. And you hear this in places where there is conflict, or where there's, it's like, they do this, we don't do this. We do this, they don't do that. And so the first step, I believe, is to recognize that they are as fully human as we are.
We've discovered time and time again how apologizing is just so difficult for so many people, and yet despite it being so difficult, it's in fact the easiest, cheapest way of resolving a conflict. But people won't say sorry. Why? Because their self-esteem won't allow it. They feel that if they say sorry, they are bringing upon themselves guilt, shame, blame, you name it.
One of the core values that we hold here is mutual respect. And that's really what Ubuntu is about. It's I am because we are. It's I can't succeed without being part of a society, without being alert to the fact that I should be helping you, because in the end I rely on you in order to succeed in my own world.
I mean, I think gender equality in any kind of aspects of life and society and institutions is critical. I don't think it's the only solution. I think it's about trying to understand power dynamics and where the power balances lie. But of course that would be a very positive step.
I think it's always good for us to be reminded of our humanity and our limits as human beings, but also that connection with people around the world, just whether it be refugees or it be somebody who's in prison for being in a gang, they are still part of our shared humanity. And the work with the foundation around Ubuntu is about that connection, and we can't just isolate issues that happen in one part of the world and say it's not ours, it is ours.
We should all respect each other, no matter what our backgrounds, orientations, gender, culture, religion. We should respect each other and debate things in a cultured and polite way.